By now you've probably seen the May Ashes of Creation dev update or a rundown of it. In my opinion, this is the best update we have seen yet for this MMO, and it's given me a lot of motivation and future ideas for future videos. In case you haven't seen the update, I'm going to do a quick overview before I get into some of the details and some of my thoughts about it. The dev update followed their usual format. First they started with a studio update. They hired 5 people in one day, which is great to hear. The main part of the video was the demonstration of seasons and weather, and they ended with some art and Q&A. This was an incredible demo of the tech they're working on for seasons. I think the word mind-blowing is way overused today, especially as a clickbait tactic, but I gotta admit, I think saying mind-blowing to this is appropriate. The depth of what they're doing with this system is off the charts. They had talked about all the things they wanted to do with weather and seasons in the past, and we knew they wanted it to be important. They had already talked about how each season would be 1 week long, and how it would affect spells, trade routes, flora, and fauna. But to see it actually all come to life in the game was incredible. I thought the extreme attention to detail was what really set this apart from weather in Ashes versus weather in prior MMOs. Here's one of the devs that was on the stream talking about some of the tech behind the weather systems.
Go over what you have to do to transition a biome like the Riverlands into a winter season.
So it's the terrain materials, and there's many materials that get applied to the terrain, and each one, accepts snow at a different rate, a different intensity. And there's the assets that all get kind of the same material function that applies snow to the tops of them. There's the particle effect that moves with the player camera that handles both snow and rain and any kind of precipitation. There's the volume fog that just went away, as we saw, as it cleared up. The volumetric cloud in the sky has a material that needs to respond to season changes and weather changes. There's a wind actor. I mean, I could keep going for a while.
there's a lot. Suffice to say, there's a lot of stuff that goes into changing a region of the world.
I thought the details of these systems were so inspiring that I actually decided to cut up a video segment demonstrating each little minute detail. Here it is. How do you create the best weather system ever seen in an MMO? It's all in the details. Things like the leaves falling off the trees in the fall and returning in the spring. Flora and fauna changing with the seasons. Butterflies in the spring. Also we have mushrooms in the spring. And the Kirin changing colors. Bears shaking off the snow. The actual sound of the footsteps changing with the seasons.
Oh, this
and
looks
the weather.
great. And it looks like even the ground is getting wet. I can hear the footsteps change to the water. That's so good.
You have snow accumulating in certain areas more than others, and disappearing from other areas more quickly than others. You have the wind affecting everything differently. It affects the player clothing, and the grass moves in waves instead of one big group. Even the trees move independently in the wind. And the obstructions that can be caused by the weather is a really dynamic thing that has a massive effect on the world. Again, I just want to reiterate the polish and attention to detail they have with this. This gives me a lot of hope when we get to the bigger systems that they will hit the mark. I also want to talk about the sheer complexity of this game. The weather system is incredibly complex, and when you read about details they have shared about the other systems in this game is unbelievably deep. It makes me wonder how many of these details will make it into the initial launch of the game, and how many things get pushed out to a future content patch after release. Because when you start to hear Steven go on these rants about features that will be in the game, you start to wonder how they will ever release this game in a reasonable manner with the massive scope they're going for. Just listen to this part of the update where Steven talks about the effects the seasons will have on the world at large.
You know, the relevance of this, you know, not just from a beautiful aesthetic perspective here, but what makes it so unique is the dynamic element of these seasons and the weather systems changing to the behavior actions of the player, right? So, you know, part of the triggers that can create seasonal change is not just time related for each of our biomes, but they're also indicated by events that occur on the server, whether that be certain raid bosses forming or a relic being acquired by a particular node and being activated to change potentially the weather out of a winter state into a spring state. And the reason why a node might have interest in doing that, of course, is because weather and the seasons also affect skills and abilities. They affect crops and gatherables, vehicles and mounts, ships, creatures and loot tables change. Their behaviors might change. Resistances and weaknesses or synergies might be relevant in certain seasons or weather systems. Targeting might change. The AoE radius might grow for a fire effect if you're in the middle of summer, or it might shrink if you're in the middle of a storm.
He also mentioned that players can change the weather. I have a lot of questions about this. So let's say the normal Riverlands seasonal cycle is spring week 1, summer week 2, fall week 3, winter week 4. If the players switch the season to winter in week 2, does that then change the natural rotation of the seasons? Would week 3 then become spring? Or is this seasonal change by the players only at the node level and not the region level, and only temporary? And then the region/node goes back to the normal schedule. Another thought I have regarding the changing of the playable area with the obstructions that they demonstrated in the live stream, and with certain playable areas such as dungeons that open up as nodes advance or only during certain dynamic events. You could have a lot of interplay between these various systems. So it is entirely possible that certain areas of the world are only accessible when a node is at a certain level or higher, and during a certain season. Or even more advanced combinations are possible, like a combination between node state, dynamic events, and seasons having to be just right to open up a specific area. The intricacies and complexity is literally, as I said, mind-blowing. That concludes my thoughts for now on the weather and season systems. It was an incredible demonstration, and in my opinion made this the best live stream yet. A couple other interesting tidbits from the live stream. They showed the Riverlands biome as the area they demonstrated the tech in. They also mentioned this was a key focus area for Alpha 2 and the largest zone of Alpha 2. This is interesting to me, as I think I'm going to use this information to make my own Alpha 2 map speculation video. Narc did a great video on it with his theory on what regions we would see in Alpha 2. Alpha Soul has a great video on the Ashes of Creation map. After this little nugget, I have my own theories as well, and I'd like to share those with you guys in a future video. Also, Steven mentioned that this type of season and weather system has never been done in an MMO. I did some research to see if any MMO has even come close, and the best I found was Final Fantasy XI. This game had a lot of the features Ashes is looking to do in terms of affecting skills and abilities. It was a pretty complex system for an MMO launched in 2002, but it still doesn't come close to what Ashes of Creation is making. I'll probably do a video on the comparison between Ashes of Creation's weather systems and other MMOs that have had decent weather systems, such as Final Fantasy XI, Final Fantasy XIV, and Black Desert Online, which in Black Desert, you had dynamic weather that affected the crops, crafting, sailing, and combat, whereas in Final Fantasy, it mostly just affects the combat. We also saw the starting city for the Aelin in Alpha 2, which is also in the Riverlands biome, and it looked fantastic. We may have seen an augmented Mage Blink for the first time. The first spell he used here looks very similar to the second spell, which is the Mage Blink. It is also very possible it was another spell entirely, maybe a Rogue Shadow Step, but if it was an augment, that would be a big leak, as augments in the game and working would be a huge progress step for the game as well. So augments might be in the game game and working. We have seen the largest Alpha 2 region, and it looks to be pretty well fleshed out. We saw the VEC in game for the first time. So a lot of things are in the game now, which means it is time for me to do an official when is Alpha 2 speculation video. I think I have enough information to make a more reasonable guess now. Before this dev update, I thought there was a very little chance of Alpha 2 in 2022. Probably less than a 1% chance. But with seeing the Riverlands looking very close to completion and potentially seeing the augmented Mage Blink skill, although that is speculative and questionable, I think there is now a chance to see Alpha 2 in 2022. It's probably only a 10 to 20% chance still, but the progress of development in my opinion is further than I had once speculated. Also, this little nugget at the end from Steven where he mentioned the quality bar for a lot of assets is close to a launch date now moves the needle a little bit for me as well.
And I told you that from a quality bar perspective, this is getting near, you know, what we would be comfortable with on a shipping perspective for the project when we launch, right?
Before I end the video, a couple more little nuggets from the Q&A sections that I found interesting. There will probably eventually be player collisions with the larger plants, not the grass most likely. Snow accumulating on the player is not likely. Weather and seasons will not affect loot tables, but can and will affect creature spawns. They also mentioned they're prototyping how ground targeted spells will work underwater. Guys, overall this dev update was amazing and it's really brought my hype level back up. Many more Ashes videos are going to be on the way within the next month from me now. I'm going to leave you guys with a little tidbit from the beginning where Steven is talking about basically what the holy grail of making a good MMO is. I thought it was great, well put together thought. So I want to end with that. Don't forget, like, subscribe, comment, all those good things, and I'll see you guys in the next video.
And so much of what makes an MMO a good MMO is the gameplay. I mean, you can have the best looking game out there, and if the gameplay's not good, if the systems don't make sense, if there's problems with the economy and whatnot, like all of that beauty goes to waste. And at the same time, you can have a game that has amazing systems and has amazing gameplay, and that can keep a game going for a very long time. But if you also have with that beautiful sceneries and immersive world environments and awesome visual effects and just stuff that brings you into the world, that's like the holy grail, right? That's and especially if the company that publishes that game doesn't put in pay to convenience or pay to win items, you're like, oh my God, we've done it. Like, you know, we built it, they will come.